Okay, so at the end of the second turn in September, not a lot happening here. Some extra troops for the Mossels in Aleppo. I can't remember. The Crusaders get nothing. Hassan's siege was successful. He killed the Norman guy there, but left Raymond's guy as a hostage. What he's looking at is maybe he can cut a deal with Raymond. He doesn't feel the Normans can be trusted. They're too big and too powerful. But Raymond might be useful against the Syrians to some extent. He just doesn't believe that they're a risk to winning the game in the way that the Normans are, where they could take Jerusalem and become quite powerful, perhaps. Dukas set his siege up, and Raymond was there, unfortunately. Raymond's a better leader, so he takes command, and he had enough treachery to prevent Dukas, who bid too, from taking the space. This is Raymond's only chance of survival, essentially, is avoiding the treachery or whatever. The chance of the die roll would have been very low. There's like 75 there. Yeah, he would have had... Dukas had no chance of taking this out because there's so many troops there. There's 25 troops essentially there. Times 3 makes 75. And at this point, Robert, Normandy, and Flanders have gathered together, the Norman power, with the intention of freeing that. Now, do they really want to save Raymond? Not terribly, but they certainly would like to crush the Syrians. If the Syrians aren't going to help them by taking Jerusalem at this point, you know, the hell with them. They've got a bigger problem, though, with the Mossels, because the Mossels are the one hammer that they can throw against Bohemond in that case. The Fatimids are just too weak. I looked at their strength. They've got... I don't know what this is. I think it's a 1 under there. I can't get the pieces to separate. And another, it's like 3 strength points here. They've got about 10 strength points. That's about what Tancred has down here. That's about what the Germans have. There's just not any force there, which means the Normans aren't going to get Jerusalem that way. The only way they can get it is by enforcing the Syrians to take it. Now, why would the Syrians do that? The Syrians want to win this battle. If they can clear the Normans out of the way, then they can keep going and probably deal with Bohemond's, with Tancred, with the Germans if need be, whatever. Or they can march up and take Antioch. Either way, their position is a lot stronger. So they'd rather be allied with the Mossels right now, because if they serve as the Normans' sort of buddy, all they're really doing is making it easier for the Normans to win. They're going to lose the fight eventually under those terms if they're wasting their strength against the weaker Crusaders to begin with. On the other hand, they really don't have the force to handle the Normans either, so they may pull out and leave this job to the Mossels, who may just have the strength to handle this. They're quite powerful. They're still above 50. Or maybe they can coordinate and fight one big grand battle out over, what is that, Tripoli there? That would be kind of cool. Yeah. And that would be that would probably determine the game. If they fail, that hands it to Bohemond. And if they see, that's why the Normans don't want to do it, because they can be talked into, look, if you defeat us, Bohemond wins. If you do not defeat us, you're going to be in weak shape. So maybe you want to let us take this the Tripoli out. The problem with that, of course, is the Mossels don't particularly want to save the Syrians' bacon. But they may not be too opposed to it. Depends on what they get. Actually, I noticed as I was doing the income, I forgot to do the siege attrition here. And I've got to mark this somehow as being 1 level worse for Dukas if he remains there sieging it. But Raymond took some significant losses. He's now... The one Norman leader there died. His troops died. in the attrition. So Raymond is now alone, and he's gotten control of Tortosa, or whatever that is. No, that's Tripoli. Tripoli's valuable. I also looked at this, and this wasn't a guaranteed victory, but I let it stand. I didn't realize how much Gerard had with him. So that was... Yeah, actually, I think there was no chance of Hassan taking this. So I'm going to repopulate this as well. Neither one could be taken. Although neither of these were taken, both of them were reduced significantly. And Gerard especially, he was a fairly powerful leader here, but he's lost a couple of strength points. So now he's down to a 3. That puts him to a 9. But the fact that these guys were only half sieging, some kind of worry maybe Bohemond would come to them or whatever. Mainly they didn't think that was more than a 1 strength point unit there. So nothing's happened except that Raymond's gotten control of these 2 areas. And the Normans are being warned off, like I said, with the, hey, you knock us out and you're handing the game to Bohemond, aren't you? Hard negotiation over here on the October 1st turn. Basically, the Syrians and Mosuls could not come to an agreement with the Normans that they could trust. The Normans being here meant that they could smash Dukak if he's sitting here. If the Mosuls moved down here, they could combine to defeat the Normans, but that was kind of against whatever deal they came against. Whatever deal they sort of came to was, yeah, we won't attack, you guys eliminate Raymond's troops, and I'll let you keep the cities, I guess, although I really do want both of those. Can't you go north after you kill them? No, that doesn't make much sense. They would love to get rid of Raymond. Raymond is a pain in their ass. However, with those Normans there, they just can't trust that they won't get attacked if they're split up doing the best job they could. And they can't be certain that... Well, I don't know. The main thing is they can't feel safe. And the other thing is, winter's coming. The rains. They have to have a port to trace a line of communication to. Worse than that, Hassan's forces were running low on money, and it turned out he actually got hit with the Caliph's tax again, or he did for the first time, 25%. He has very little money, though, anywhere. It all came from the cities back here. But he doesn't really have enough to winter it out if he doesn't get his troops into cities. So he kind of wants to pull back anyway. And given that Dukak is also pulling back, it's better for him too. They can spread their troops out and get them into winter quarters. And that means the Normans have to do the same. They did send a fleet over here to Latakia. They want to extricate those troops. This is an untenable position, at least with Raymond in the middle and possibly Muslim forces in there as well. I've got to do the economic crap. And the Normans and the Syrians have found their winter quarters. The Syrians actually splitting up here, as did the Normans up in Tyre and Acre. The Mosuls have made it across the river. They've still got a ways to go. They've still got low money. Caravans coming in at Homs, that'll help the Syrians, but they have tons of money. Someone may want to fund the Mosuls because they're the ones due to take out Bohemond. We'll see who, what, if any, are willing to throw some cash at them. I'm not sure what's going to happen after the winter. The Syrians probably want to take something like Tripoli, maybe Tortosa, and go for Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the Mosuls, well, they have a limited amount of what they can take. Basically, they want to be bribed, say Homs, in order to take Antioch. And maybe they'll give Antioch to the Syrians, if that's of any value. But they don't desire it. They didn't pick it as their options. Alright, I Well, this turn and next turn we got income still. September essentially was a nothing happens turn. Just Hassan moving up here. I got to pay off his thing, but even random events kind of crapped out on this turn. Everyone else is in their winter quarters, not really willing to do anything. Hassan has to make his way here. He's got to pay to go here, but that's going to be cheaper when winter comes to spread his forces out a little bit more than, say, just moving here where he wouldn't have to pay. Because in the winter, he's going to face doubled attrition, and it's going to be harder to get where he wants to go. He could conceivably do a winter campaign, but he's the one player on the board without enough money to really afford it. And we enter the final year of the game, 1099. That's part of why things have been kind of slow here. This guy had fallen sick last turn for one whole turn. No effect there. Ooh, I forgot to roll the boats. I did it last turn, but I didn't do it this turn. This one goes away. Not much effect there. You know, nobody's doing anything over the winter, and it's becoming increasingly obvious. One of the reasons the Normans are probably the most capable of doing something at this point. The Syrians could launch an attack, but they have their reason to hold off on their attack on Jerusalem, and they don't necessarily really see a reason to expend a lot of effort. Basically, they're going to start their attack off up in the north and then slide down to Jerusalem and try to take it at the end of the whole sequence. That way, they're well, one of the things is they don't really hate Raymond being here. What they don't want to see is Raymond move forward and attack them. So they've got to keep him screened. But they need to knock Jerusalem or Antioch out. The Mosul Turks are willing to take out Antioch, even though it's not of value to them, on the promise of Homs, which may or may not actually be transferred. Remember, the Syrians can refuse. And with an endgame action, why should they keep to their word? Well, likewise, though, over here with Jerusalem, the Syrians don't want to move on that until it's too late for the Normans to take it. They don't want the Normans to get it. In fact, they'd rather leave it in Tancred's hands. But they would like to own it. For the Fatimids, the Normans don't want to attack the Fatimids. They see no point to it. They're not interested in the territory down here, and they don't view the Fatimids as that big a threat. Now, again, end of game, things may change. Because they don't want if they're going to make a move against, say, Syrians or something, they need to wipe the Fatimids out before they make that move. They can afford to do that and let Eustace sort of grab some of the territory here if the Fatimids are out. You know, the Germans aren't a real threat. So they're not a problem for me. But my big problem as the Normans is I just don't own anything. I just don't own everything that I need to. And in particular, I really would like Jerusalem. That cut of Tortosa and Tripoli was painful. That gives them both to Raymond. And I don't really have an easy way to get them back without help from the Syrians. And the Syrians, like I said, they might not want to wipe out Raymond. Cool thing, winter means I don't have to do the economic chores. And they are a chore. I mean, you can look at this. That's not so bad if each person has just their own thing, but playing all sides is kind of a tedium. I'm finding myself spending most of my time on the quieter turns adding money to all the different territories. Now that gives you an idea how quick the game kind of progresses. On turns where more than one force of a particular power is moving, when everything's not stacked together, when I'm gathering the forces, and that'll be happening in the spring, then I find that I spend a bit of time plotting out my movements, because you have to kind of arrange, well, where am I going to meet to minimize my expenditures on attrition? That may not be such a big deal for most of the powers at this point, because there's a lot of money in the game. You can see, a lot of people have hundreds. And there's a lot of money stored up in places as well. But certainly for the Mossels, it is still an issue. They are really working on a shoestring budget here, and they're the only ones kind of losing money as they try to find some place where they can hide the rest of their troops. They got 6 here. They're going to have to leave some guys probably in Ravenna on the way through too. Because quite simply, you pay in the winter for moving. A small force might not pay for moving. You pay for standing still. It's just very, very painful what they're having to suffer, whereas no one else is in a position where they have too little money. And they've got a heavy burden on them, which I could definitely see the Normans throwing them, 50, 100 Byzants, because the Normans aren't too worried. But the Normans, I believe, still own Latakia. Yep. It's still theirs. They're probably not going to keep it, though. Bohemond has the ability to grab things. There's also going to be this final auction at the end of the game. Nobody's been worrying too much about the Armenians recently. They could make a strike against the Mossels. I could see Bohemond trying to use them early just to further drain the Mossel ability to cope. But yeah, I think we'll probably see some bidding there. And we may see the Mossels trying to convince someone else to use the Armenians earlier, or once they are bid on by Bohemond, to start striking the Sicilians. And that's the weird thing. That's the one reason Bohemond doesn't want to activate them, is because if he spends to activate them, then every turn thereafter he's going to have to spend to try to keep them out of someone else's hands. The Mossels probably don't have the money to bid for them. But then the question becomes, well, what does someone else do? If it's the Syrians, fine, but if it's the Normans that have them, they can't really take, say, Roger out of Tarsus. Not that that's a huge deal, but anyway, that's just some thoughts here where we are here at the beginning of this new year of 1099. And there was a millennial feeling here. Now, granted, not as big as the one around the year 1000, but there was a feeling that 100 years after might be the trigger. There was also a feeling that 1033 might be the trigger, just of the apocalypse and everything. And in some sense, the Crusades were fueled by this. Let's get to Jerusalem before the world might end. Of course, they were more fueled by the political situation that Jerusalem was actually cut off to them at this point, where it hadn't been earlier. Okay, enough kind of historical babbling. Enough babbling entirely. The remainder of the Christian fleets disappear for a few months. I'm trying to put them here so that I kind of cover both the March 2 turns, because, well, there's an extra turn on the track. We got kind of screwed up by that before. Anyway, the random events do what none of the players were able to do. Wipe out the strength point that was up here in Tarsus. That makes it even easier for someone to go grab it. They don't actually have to send a force that can siege it or anything. Bohemond may send more forces there. He's got definite worries, however, in terms of being able to face, say, the Mossels, if they go in. Speaking of the Mossels, they do the only action this turn, moving this far. That's going to only cost them 1. They have, it's 2, 4, 6. They were outside the city still, so they don't have to move back out. That's going to cost them 12 points of attrition, but they're here on the 21 to 30 table. That's still only 1 point, so they have to spend 5 Byzants to pay that off, and then we'll make the trip, I think, to Ravenden or Birzhik or whatever for free. Absolutely nothing of interest happened in the February turn. Just Hassan moving on to Ravenden. That's it. No events of any great excitement there. A treachery point which Tancred took. He's basically, Tancred and Bohemond have both collected up their treachery points. That means that somebody has to actually siege them. That'll take a significant amount of force. We're talking 10 strength points here. They've got 40 point force, you need to have 3-to-1 to roll on the siege table. So that's 120 strength points to downgrade them. Now, the longer a siege goes, the more the casualties rack up from the city attrition table. So that'll go down, you know, how big a force is required. But you need at least 40 to even set up the siege. Right? No, yeah. You need to at least match the value of the troops and the city to blockade it and cause those attrition rolls. So, you know, and that would be a full siege, which means it's half strength for any relieving force. Not that anyone's likely to help get Bohemond out of this situation. Everyone's opposed to him right now. Alright, well, we're hitting the rain turn, which means the armies may start coming forward because the attrition's not so bad, but there are still issues with crossing these rivers, of course. First part of March down, and not a lot's changed. The rainy weather kept people from moving too much. Dukak sliding down a little down here. Balduke thought about moving, but I chose not to. That's why he's restacked. Wasab pushed here, Hassan back to Aleppo to collect the bigger income from Aleppo. I'm not sure why I've got troops in Ravendun. It's unlikely anybody will take that from me. However, that is a city that I've for some reason marked down. Now, it's a 1-point city, so I don't know why I've got it. I think I've got it miswritten for 2. I probably meant Harank, which is a 2-point city that I forgot to write down. So I'll probably switch that out. And this barely matters. So I think that was just an error, but otherwise that's where we are. And none of the Crusaders did anything. The boats are coming back now. Oh, there was some cash showed up there in Cyprus. Which the Normans seized again for Famagusta's treasury. I think there was a plague in Aleppo. Reduced some of the Mosul forces. There's some extra troops for the Fatimids, but, you know, 5 strength points off the random events table as opposed to off of the... There's a Muslim relief option. But I haven't seen that come up yet, and maybe I'm missing something there, because I'm also not seeing it come up in here. Okay, this is why the Crusaders always lose and why I quit. And knocking this rule out of the game is actually making a more interesting game. Every time you roll a random event with the Muslims, you're supposed to check if they own that city listed here. They'll get the points of troops from it. That's going to create huge quantities of additional troops. And this is the most interesting game I've yet had of the Crusades, with the limited reinforcements coming in 5 at a time, as opposed to, I normally think I play with the actual rolls here, where you roll, where you check each event die roll that the Muslims roll, and the more stuff they own, so unless you wipe them out completely, the more their army is going to grow. And we're talking about significant growths here, 15, 10 strength points. That's what I've written off. As you can see, it's been a fairly balanced and kind of interesting game. Yes, the Crusaders are probably going to win this one. That's a first because of this rule not being... me not noticing this rule. Wow. So, if you want an interesting game of the First Crusade, you play without this rule, it seems. I don't know how fair it is, because to some extent, wiping out, you know, it gives some real impetus to wiping out the Muslim forces. It gives some real power to the Caliphate of Egypt and, you know, their ability to intervene in such now. But I'll tell you this much, I have never, ever seen the Crusaders managed to do this well and still holding on and looking like maybe one of them has a chance of winning at the end of the First Crusade. It's just a matter of you have to take everything that you possibly can. And they've largely done that. I don't think they could have gained more in Syria. Raymond could have gotten luckier than he did. But he's largely been driven out by the forces that were here without those reinforcements. Now, if you'd imagine, there'd probably be an extra 30 or 40 strength points in Syria easily, and probably significantly more over in the Egyptian territories that they were able to rise up. Which means, of course, Jerusalem would be meat, and this area would be meat. I'm going to keep playing the way I'm going. No reason to add those reinforcements at this point in the game, I don't think. And I think the game's actually a lot more interesting without them. Second turn of march, we have the Syrians went in and grabbed Tortosa, and they may spread out a little bit, grab Latakia as well, leave some troops around. Of course, anything they leave up here, Raymond can go take. And if they don't defend Homs or Damascus well, if they head down to Jerusalem, as they're being told to do, again, Raymond can take these things. They can't really afford to leave Raymond alone, so I think they're going to have to go cope with him. The problem there is, well, numerically, they probably don't have the numbers to take him out. And leadership-wise, Dukak has only one treachery point, and Ridwan has one. That's probably not going to work. Raymond just got one this turn. But at least we can start proceeding on the siege attrition table and try to take it away from him. Because as long as he exists, we don't feel like we have any assurance. He will not give us assurance, or any that we can believe that he's not going to go marching in this direction. The Normans may say, yeah, we need this. But Raymond obviously isn't going to win with just Tripoli. And also equally obviously, he seemed interested in Damascus and this route coming down here. So maybe he likes Tripoli, but he probably doesn't have any great interest in anything else. And over here we see the siege of Antioch beginning with all the Mosles there. Again, will that succeed? Hard to tell. The Mosles have a treachery point under Balduk, who is present and capable of leading. On the other hand, Bohemond has a couple of them. Now, the players presumably have that information vaguely secret, but they also have some idea how many times they've rolled the treachery marker, even if I don't. Among other things, the Syrians would have gotten 15 more points in Damascus this turn, if I had been playing by the rules correctly. Probably once every 2 or 3 turns, you're going to see some big heap of troops show up at one of these Muslim-controlled cities. And I just don't see how, the Christians have some advantage on the field, but not enough to make up for that kind of losses. And they can't pay off their losses in combat. They can only pay off attritional losses. All right, so what happened? Dukak moved into place against Raymond to lay siege there. Once he takes Tripoli, if he takes Tripoli, then he's agreed to keep going into Jerusalem. But there's probably, there's maybe enough time. Barely. Meanwhile, Balduk looked at Bohemond, and strength-wise, Bohemond had some 68 strength points. I forgot to roll Balduk's attrition. And Balduk has some 70-something. The 68 is because it's quadrupled. Bohemond lost a couple of strength points and allowed him to take half of those strength off his Armenian force and half off himself. I'm not sure what, the rules aren't very clear as to that, and I don't want to look it up. But we also get to roll to see what happens here, and it's a 4. If we got one of these asterisks, that would reduce the land value of Antioch. Ooh, it's a level 2. I'm sorry. That's 2 hits to the Muslims. Now, to the Mosles. They can pay that off, but they're running short on cash at this point, and they'll be taking further attrition losses after next turn, if you sit more than 2 turns in a hex and you're not in a city, you start taking attrition, immediate automatic attrition, and it's kind of painful. I forget to mention a few things there. One is Bohemond, he can't do it because he's in a city. Now, I'm not sure that's allowed. That's under siege. But Tancred laid a bribe on all of these guys here. Actually, some of that bribe goes from Bohemond because it's his own troop, his own Armenians that he was bribing, so I can transfer that money over out of Antioch for that. But these are a threat. What he's basically going to tell the Moslems is, look, I'm going to unleash these Armenians on you. Is that a big deal? Maybe, maybe not. The Normans are very interested in seeing Bohemond fall here. They have tons and tons of money over at Famagusta, and they're just going to say, look, I'll bid 20 per. There's no way Bohemond can maintain that. You know, they'll come in and be able to, you know, cause problems. Now, conceivably, he could also bribe the guys in Antioch, but I don't know how much sense that makes, to bribe people who are under siege. How do you get the message to them and everything? So in terms of storyline and trying to maintain some level of reasonable, you know, you almost feel like this game has to have a game master to judge all the fuzzy areas where the rules don't apply correctly, or where they don't quite make sense, or where they just seem like bullshit. And in this case, I think you could bribe them in Antioch, and that just kind of seems like, yeah, maybe there's a chance, maybe there's not, I don't know. But anyway, the other thing that I forgot to mention was that Balduc fired off a treachery point. Now, Bohemond fired off 2 in defense. He doesn't know how many the Moslems had, and he wants to make sure that it doesn't just fall. It would have been unlikely anyway. I don't think anybody there has very high guile on the Mosul side. The Emir of Tarsus has 2. That would be the best that we have. So yeah, it's pretty unlikely. Anyway, I got to go through the pointless exercise of filling in all these little boxes for all the cities. Speaking of that pointless exercise, and because I'm in the mood to babble and not in the mood to actually do it, it would be very easy to make a play, sort of especially for a solitaire game, but even for players, just little cards for each city, or little boxes about this big that they can hand out to each other that would indicate control of the city. They could throw their cash in it, they could keep troop strength points or whatever, all off map. Anyway, I'm just never that I don't know, that motivated, and keeping track of it on paper isn't a big deal if other people are playing, and if I'm the only person playing, well, it's just a tax on me. Alright, well, there's almost no chance of anything changing. I forgot, when you're in the First Crusade, you can pay treasury points even when you're under siege to pay off your attrition rolls. Essentially, the amount of points that are sitting in Antioch, 84, I don't think that can be overcome in the amount of turns that are left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 turns. Yeah, it can be. So conceivably the die rolls could go badly enough. The Normans can start funneling money. Now they bribed all these guys, counter-bribed them, but some of them got to move anyway, and I didn't move them. Thoris made it all the way to Edessa? I don't think so. 2, 4, 6, 8. He made it to Beersheba. Kirk Wallace went and took Samosata, which is now under Bohemond's control. I don't think it matters for him. And Gabriel, because remember, the movement orders still work. Gabriel made it to there. The movement orders are still in effect, but this actually isn't Sicilian. This is actually Norman. The Normans have Samosata now, which I ought to record, because they're the ones who are in control of that force after the bribe. The bribe takes effect, but the orders stay in place, or something like that. I mean, you know, I got to make up the rules as I go, right? But here's the problem. nobody really wants to do anything. The Damascus don't have enough, or the Syrians don't have enough force to even siege Raymond. I missed that. So they're going to pull back, but they're not willing to make a move for Jerusalem. Raymond may come out and try to challenge them if they don't leave him alone completely. He doesn't have much else he can do. He's not really interested in any of this territory. But of course, if he leaves Tripoli, then the Normans can come back up there. So, you know, I'm kind of the mood of the hell with it. Let's call it here, because it's reached a certain stasis. I don't really particularly want to plot out the other turns. I don't think anything exciting is going to happen to him. So I think that's what I'm going to do, since I screwed up anyway. I think I'll play it out. What the hell? I just hate doing something so pointless. I mean, this is enough turns. It may take me another day to do, just because of the pointlessness factor of it, wanting to not be doing this anymore. But no, I don't quit these things, I guess. The hell with it. You know, if it wasn't for having to do the bookkeeping every turn, but the hell with it. The only chance anything's going to change is if the Moslems get a treachery point. And I think everybody's willing to just call it here, count the points, and say it's over. I am. Alright, so I'll come back after scoring this, because, you know, I'm looking at it and throwing some bribes from the Normans to keep the Moslems in place. But the Moslems aren't happy. They're going to have to move a dude here. And then I realized, shit, I haven't calculated all of the income yet. I just really don't want to keep facing that when it is a pointless exercise in my mind. I don't think the Syrians are going to be able to come down here. Certainly some things may shake up down here, but the hell with it. Let's just count the points here on a surprise edge. So, with no one ever able to remove Bohemond, and, you know, conceivably with the faking of rules I've done, Robert and the Egyptians could have combined to go take Jerusalem or something. Of course, they don't want to do that because they don't want to give it to Robert, who would then be as ahead as Bohemond was. He would almost certainly get it with his high guile. So, man, it could have been a crapshoot here, but the hell with it, I've quit. Alright, so point-wise, he got the most with 48 points. Huge amount of points from, you know, Antioch and Jerusalem, two of the biggest point getters on the whole map. He paid some penalties here. He got some -1s, Latakia, Famagusta. Those got taken from him, and maybe that would have gone down a little bit, but he wouldn't have lost the key things the way things were going. The next ranking is the Fatimids at 25. They kept their Egyptian territory and the riches here. Somebody could have taken that away from them. No question there. Robert was contemplating it all game, you know, for the past 6 months, basically. Do I want to knock the Fatimids out? Nah, I think I'm ahead of them. Well, turns out he wasn't. Next, after that, is actually the Moslems with 20 points. Part because of Edessa's big score. They don't get penalized for things they don't have. I had some -1s in here, they don't have them. But they have some big cities there, and they actually ended up in pretty good shape, and certainly would have been in the running if they grabbed Antioch. Say, take 15 points away from him down to 33, 15 to him, except Moslems don't want Antioch. Okay, so we would still have the Sicilians in the lead at that. If we took the 25 away from Jerusalem only, they'd be at 23, which would put them behind the Fatimids, and especially if the Fatimids got Jerusalem out of it. But if the Fatimids didn't get Jerusalem, the Normans would be at 31. In fact, the Normans are doing quite poorly, almost as badly as the Germans at 2, and Raymond's Southerns at -8, because the Syrians came in, what, 4th? You know, all the Muslim powers showed pretty well. Now, here's the thing. If I had been playing by the rules, those Muslims would all be doing better. Every couple turns, you'd be seeing a significant increase in the Muslim forces, 10, 15 strength points coming in off this table. There's no question about that. I watched, you know, as the numbers were coming up, and I was seeing, you know, Yeah, it happens. You know, if you look at it, so let's look at Egyptian stuff. The Egyptians are particularly good at this game in this position because they're going to be getting these reinforcements and are not really threatened. So you can see basically 1 out of 6 turns, a little better than that. They're pretty much guaranteed some 10, 15 points in Cairo or Damietta. Make it 2 out of 6. Alexandria down here, Pelusium. Okay, we're at about 50-50. They're going to be getting troops all game long. So they're the ones who really gain from this. Let's look at others, though. Ascalon, well, actually, that is Fatimid to begin with. But now we start hitting Jerusalem. Okay, that would have been Syrian early on, and they had it for a long time. Acre, Tyre, those would have been Syrian areas reproducing troops. Now, maybe the Crusaders could make it down there, but the Fatimids could knock the Crusaders out, and I don't think there's a thing in the world that can stop that. And then as we go up, Edessa starts getting huge amounts, 20 troops. Aleppo, 15, Hama, 15. Yeah, the Mosuls are also, once they come in and start taking over, the little core that they got, it's going to just produce. And that's the problem. I think this game, they tried to design Berg tried to design a system that worked, fitted it to 2 Crusades, and then found out it didn't. Well, maybe not. But I'm guessing they actually play tested the 3rd Crusade a lot more, and that the balancing factor of this is off the 3rd Crusade with 1 Muslim player potentially getting reinforcements throughout the course of the game, as opposed to 3 Muslim players really getting significant amounts. And the problem is, even if the Muslims aren't really cooperating, and they shouldn't be, the Mosuls want to let the Crusaders gain some ground before they continue on. Even if they're cooperating, what they can't do is even if they're not cooperating, what they can't do is they can't fight each other. Now, of course, you could fake the rules as I did and said, okay, the Mosuls are going to join with the Christians and actually help them in a battle. That may be the only way. That may be the only way of this thing working out. What I saw generally was the Crusaders all cooperated really hard, get past Antioch, get some of this, and then they hit a roadblock. Because the Mosuls, although they want the Syrian stuff, weren't willing to help the Crusaders there, or maybe because the rules say that Muslims can't attack Muslims unless they both agree to. Well, so I think the game needs a lot of tweaking to make it work, is all I'm saying. And every time I play it, I walk away disgusted for one reason or another. In this case, I'm really not. This was the best playing I've ever had. It's just that it's, one, finding out that I was playing the rules wrong was disturbing. But not terribly, but really what it came down to was the diplomatic agreements that I came to kind of froze the game, and I could see a group throwing the towel in at the point at which we did. Would it have been possible to work something out so that Jerusalem fell? Probably, but without counting all the points ahead of time, and I guess you probably should do that when you're playing a game of this nature. Or of any nature, I just hate doing it. It wasn't clear. It appeared that the Normans would get the win off of Jerusalem. And they would have if they had Jerusalem, wouldn't they? At the 25 points, 31 would have put them above the Fatimid points. Do I think it's savable? Do I think that enough knowledge of the game, with the tweaks that I added, could survive the huge Muslim reinforcements? Yeah, I think it is, but I don't know if you'd get the historical results. The Mosul Turks were not that heavily opposed to the Syrians. From my understanding of history, they didn't ally with the Crusaders. In fact, mainly I think they've spent their time fighting over Edessa and protecting Aleppo. Let me make sure I'm correct about that, but I don't remember anything of the nature of what might make this game work actually happening historically. Indeed, anything but. Carboga was the one who tried to relieve Antioch. He was betrayed by the Syrians, essentially, but more in the sense of a dissension type event, not in the sense of one side working directly with the Christians in a battle in the Hex, or anything even vaguely resembling that. More an abandonment that the dissension event gives. Now, if the Crusaders work all together, they're a very powerful force. There's no question about that. My experience has been, though, that they end up getting trashed by the Muslims. And in this case, did that happen? No, we got kind of a cool situation where they did actually make it to Jerusalem. It's just the unlimited reinforcements that just keep coming in are too much. I don't know what to do about that. Maybe they could be tweaked a little bit. Maybe... But it's hard to tell whether the political rules that I play with, make any sense at all. I feel like they're required for the game to be any fun. Because otherwise, there's no way that the Crusaders can sort of stop someone who has the advantage. Like, let's say someone gets Antioch and continues on with part of their force under their best leader, a Bohemond or whatever, and then because they still have their best leader, they get Jerusalem too. Here's the problem. You're going to have to divide up the Christian forces for the simple fact that unless you want to hand everything to the best Christian on the field, they're just not, they're not going to be able to push forward. And then the other thing is, whatever they capture, if they don't garrison it, it will fall again. They will lose all that. And again, that didn't historically happen. Historically, they split up. Antioch fell. Edessa, I don't remember who went where. I think Bohemond got Antioch. Raymond went to Edessa. And continuing on, finally... Godfrey gets Jerusalem. I think Tripoli went to some of the Normans. I don't remember who got what. I seem to remember Bohemond getting Tripoli, actually. Anyway, I can't position all of them in my head. It's been a long time since I've read much about the Crusades, but about the First Crusade, anything detailed. And things don't stick in my head very well. Anyway, my feeling is, as a game, this is more fun if you allow people to do something to interfere with each other a little bit more. As a historical treatment, I'm not sure it can possibly succeed with the reinforcements that come in. But, as you can see, you got something kind of interesting in terms of the Crusaders were able to advance quite a bit, but not able to advance with impunity, given that I didn't have those reinforcements. The problem with it? The Fatimids are not as powerful as they should be without the reinforcements. They need to have an ability to throw in and put kind of a last-ditch effort into Jerusalem. And without the reinforcements, that doesn't happen. But with them, I think the Crusaders get stopped around here. And it becomes ugly really fast for them. All right. I'm going to send this one up. I'll probably go back to a flying color scenario before I come back for the third crusade of this. I know the third crusade works a little bit better. It's shorter. And it's only 2-player, so I suspect it got a lot more playtesting than this sucker.